Hey everyone, I'm Dylan Mitchell, and this is the Rincon Horizons podcast. This show is about leadership, what it really takes to grow, to adapt, and to reach the summit over the course of your leadership journey. Our goal is simple: to help you lead better so your organization can climb higher. Each and every episode, I'm joined by my co-host and our main contributor, Todd Tuttle, managing partner of Rincon Aerospace. Todd, good to be back on with you. And for those joining us for the first time, do you mind introducing yourself for us?
Always great to be here with you, Dylan. I'm the managing partner for Rincon Aerospace. We do executive level consulting for aerospace and defense companies. We help good aerospace companies become great, and we help companies that aren't even in A&D move into this industry. Today's episode is one I've been looking forward to for a while. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship, not the glamorized version you see on social media, but what it actually takes to start something new when you have a mortgage, a family, a reputation, and a lot to lose. I've known our guest for longer than you've been alive, Dylan. He and his wife are great friends of ours. This is going to be fun.
I'm really looking forward to it. And just in the podcast, the prep that we do for all these shows and the prep that we did with Tom, it's just very apparent that he knows this world firsthand. Without further ado, Tom Yeaton is the president of Yeaton Financial Group, a financial services firm he built after a long career in the corporate world. He's been married to his wife, Tammy, for 41 years, a father of 3 boys, a grandfather of 6, and recently became a great-grandfather. With all of that just familial resume out there. Tom, welcome to Rincon Horizons. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Dylan and Todd. It's a privilege to be here. It's my first podcast as a guest.
First podcast. Awesome. We needed first podcast music. I didn't know. I wasn't prepared for the first podcast theme. We'll have to work on that.
This is going to be a little bit different from some of our other episodes, though, Todd. Today, like you said, we're talking about entrepreneurship, not from theory, but from experience. And that's what I'm really excited about. All 3 of us have started businesses, and all 3 of us have taken risks and made mistakes and had to figure things out kind of on the fly sometimes. This conversation will be a little more personal and a little more practical, I think. Tom, if you don't mind, let's start with your origin story. Every superhero has one, so let's hear yours.
Well, first of all, that's I'm not worthy of that. My origin story, it really started probably shortly after graduating from college. I just got a business degree and thought I'd get a good job with a good company, and that's what everybody that I knew did. And so I did that. I worked for a few Fortune 500 companies, got paid okay for the time. But I soon realized it really wasn't enough. My last job before I decided to make the plunge was with a Fortune 500 photo retailing chain of stores that is no longer in existence because of digital technology taking over that whole industry. But it seemed like I was the hardest one working there. I may not always be the smartest one in the room, but it didn't matter as much about my merit as it did who I knew and who knew me or who liked me, the old office politics things. I was ready for a new venture anyway. I was too scared to make that decision. So I prayed about it, and our company got acquired. And then that company got acquired again, and I decided this is my chance.
Tom, if I could just set the context, you're just married. This is you have a wife and kids at this point. You have a home. What's the backstory of what's going on in your personal life? Is all this going on in your professional life?
Yeah, good questions. Tammy was a stay-at-home mom. 3 hungry boys at home, mortgage, debt, like everything else. And for 16 years, I was in that corporate environment. So everyone depended on me, but I was miserable professionally, and it carried over into my personal life. I came home tired, grumpy. And when we all got that pink slip because our company being acquired, I was in shock. I was in a total funk that weekend. I'll never forget it. I was on my deck, just kind of staring off into space, praying. And Tammy said, weren't you praying about this? I said, well, yeah, but this is not the way I was expecting it to happen. But I firmly believe that how the saying goes, when preparation meets an opportunity, then great things happen. I was available, and I got contacted by a financial services company to consider that world. I turned them down. They offered free lunch. I said, well, I got to learn how to interview and dust up my resume, so I might as well, pursue that. So that was the beginning of the whole new life professionally. And it did change my life personally as well.
I know you mentioned a little bit, and we'll get into it later in the show, but I want to make sure we hit a top two, your faith, and how does your faith make Yeton Financial Group different?
I won't say that we are a nonprofit Christian organization, but we are Christians. We base all our decisions based on Judeo-Christian values. When it comes to investing, we only work with financial institutions that we know do not align themselves or gain most of their profit knowingly from activities that we feel are counter to our Judeo-Christian values. And it's hard to say we don't work with anybody that's not Christian. Well, then I probably wouldn't have a smartphone. But our clients work with us because they trust us, and we don't take that for granted. And I think you may have all the knowledge in the world, but if there's not trust of a client, that somebody does not trust us, well, then it's moot. It's all moot.
Good. Todd, real quick too, you started your own business. What made you want to start Rincon Aerospace? I don't think we've ever really taken the chance to unpack that in depth.
Interesting question, too. Well, Dylan, I'm a systems engineer. I talked about that a bit on the podcast. Started working with large companies. I started when I met Tom. We'll get to that in a few minutes. I met Tom and Tammy in St. Louis. Started my career there for a company called McDonnell Douglas. Eventually became Boeing, designing flight control systems for aircraft. I spent 14 years at what became Boeing St. Louis, and I was sure I was going to retire from Boeing. Came out of college with my shiny new degree. This is what I'm going to do for 35 years, and I'll roll off into the sunset with a nice retirement. Well, of course, that didn't happen. I was recruited to Moog Aircraft. I moved there, eventually became director of engineering. I was able to work on some incredible aircraft. Some of them are in service and some of them are still in development. And I was sure I would retire from Moog. I was certain this is it. But then I got recruited to Raytheon here in the desert in Tucson. So I went there, became guidance electronics department lead at Raytheon Missile Systems, and I was sure I was done. I was going to retire from Raytheon.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got recruited to be the vice president of global strategy for A&D at Siemens. And I got to travel the world. I got to meet incredible people. And once again, I was sure I would retire from Siemens. But about a year ago right now, and I'm about to leave for an entire summer of travel. And man, I was so tired of travel, and I knew I needed to make a change. And like Tom sitting on his deck, I'm praying about it. Gee, what should I do? And I could tell, well, it was a great job, great opportunities, all these things. I knew I was not living the life I wanted to live. Being gone all the time, like I said, get to go to incredible places, meet incredible people. That was wonderful, but I just didn't know what it would look like to leave corporate life. But I also couldn't imagine spending the next 5 years of my life working like that. It's hard to walk away from a steady paycheck. But last October, I decided to start my own company, and I spent my whole career working for large corporations. I wanted the freedom of working for myself. And I was able to do that. This is kind of what led to this podcast. It was a conversation Tom and I were having over his kitchen table in St. Louis about 6 weeks ago. And I was telling him, Tom, one of the best decisions I ever made was to hire Yeton Financial Group. And it was your advice, Tom, your advice, and asking me to do some hard things financially that I didn't really want to do, that allowed me to set up and to have the ability and the confidence to walk away from a steady paycheck. And I knew it'd take a while to rebuild that income, and that was okay. I could afford to do that. I wanted to do it. I got to do it. And that's how Rincon Aerospace was born. Now, I've got a career's worth of experience I can use to help A&D companies, and that's how I was able to create the coolest opportunity of my whole career. This time, I won't say I'll do it until I retire. I've got no idea what God's got in store for me. That's how Rincon Aerospace was born. And as you know, that's when you and I met. You do a whole lot more than host this podcast for me. Dylan did my whole brand identity. And we talked about, go back to our first episode where Dylan and I talk about that. But that's how I got there. And a lot of it really had to do with the confidence and the really good decision I made to start working with Yeton Financial Group and Tom and Tammy and their company several years ago.
Isn't it funny how many times we think the thing is the thing and it ends up not being the thing? But most often is the thing that gets you to the thing.
God just laughs at us when we make those decisions, doesn't he?
That
He
is
really does.
So true. And I think, Todd, I thank you for those kind words. Todd and I, we have a great background, maybe a day for a different blog, but I respect Todd's expertise in his field, and I respect his courage in making this move. And he's benefiting from mostly the mistakes I made when I made my move a long time ago. And someone said that that's the essence of wisdom, is learning from other people's mistakes. When I made the move, when I did, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I wasn't even sure I was going to stay in that industry. In fact, I didn't stay in that industry. At least he's staying within the arena of what his knowledge is. And he can take that knowledge base and those relationships with people and leverage them to launch into a whole new arena. And he's got the raw material to be the most successful consultant and coach himself for others than most people I've worked with the last 28 years.
And thank you for that, Tom. I appreciate that. And Dylan, you're an entrepreneur too. What about your origin story? How did DM Supply, your company, come to be?
DM Supply, that's Dylan Mitchell Supply, Digital Media Supply, well, however you want to, roll it off the tongue. Really just came out of years of serving in and around the local church, realizing that I know there's a lot of great churches that unfortunately struggle to communicate clearly. I'd sit in services or work with ministries that had these really awesome mission, this great people, strong leadership, but their branding, their messaging, website, it didn't really reflect what they were actually trying to do, to no fault of their own. And so I realized pretty early on that design isn't just decoration, and that communication matters, clarity matters. The way a church presents itself it either builds trust and connection, or it frankly creates friction before someone ever walks through the front door. DM Supply started from that kind of tension that I felt. I wanted to help churches, and then later on, mission-driven organizations communicate with excellence in a way that actually supports the mission instead of taking away from it. That's a 30,000-foot view to that answer. In the spirit of keeping things moving, I would love to talk about the financial side of entrepreneurship. Tom, when people think about starting a business, most of the focus goes to startup costs. I know that to be true for myself, but what are the financial considerations people usually don't think about? What tends to catch them off guard?
Again, such a good question, Dylan. Obviously, when there's startup costs, that implies you got to have some capital to cover those costs. This could be a series of podcasts for many months, but starting a business is difficult with capital. It's virtually impossible without it. Frankly, without that, I don't know if I would have been able to make it, because even that ran out. You've got to have capital. We've got to have access to capital. And in my case, I even used my 401k. I was only 39 years old, so that meant I had to eat that 10% early withdrawal penalty, but that's the only capital I had. And my thinking was back then that, you know what, my business will be successful. I'll more than make up for it, which I have, but it's never a guarantee. Thinking back then, on one degree, I was intimidated and very scared, but I was somewhat cocky in that I felt that I could do this. I didn't make much of an adjustment in my expenses. Another major mistake. There's no room for pride when you're going into the business. That doesn't mean be sheepish and scared all the time, but just be smart. My wife, Tammy, is militant when it comes to cost cutting, and we made some major adjustments for many years. That's what you got to do. In fact, I would say that if you're starting off as a W-2 employee, and once you get that entrepreneurial bug, which I had early on, and what I did not do and I should have done, is begin acting like a business owner immediately. Even, especially when you're bringing that paycheck, maybe even back off of contributing to their 401k. That sounds horrible, but short of course, getting the employer match. But what I find is that when I have a client that says, hey, I'm thinking about going into business. Okay, well, tell me about your capital. Well, I've got $1 million in my 401k. Okay, that's great. You're 50 years old. All right. You're willing to take that hit. But if they would have alongside their 401k saved some money in a non-taxable environment, they would have some working capital.
So Tom, you talk about, I'm a W-2 employee, I'm working along, I'm saving money in a 401k. What are some other options? You talk about putting money in other places to shelter money from taxes. What are some great options for people in that situation? They want to be an entrepreneur, they want to start a business, they've got their 401k. What's some other places they could put money so that they can have it to start a business like this?
Well, Todd, that's a good question. I know why you asked it. And I get asked that question a lot too. But what I find is that my experience has taught me that people are more focused on the place to put money than they are the behavior of getting money into that place. I have a client that I met years ago. who was scared of the market, never put a dime in their 401k, didn't put any money in the market. They simply lived within their means. They gave to their church. They saved money like crazy. They funded their kids' college with cash. They had 7 figures in savings and retired comfortably with a nice house and no mortgage. And they didn't do anything fancy except demonstrate the power of discipline, living within their means, starting saving early. Now, as a financial advisor, had they just put a little bit of that in the market, they would have had a whole lot more. But guess what? I know a lot more people that play the market, I'm air quoting here, that are broke. So the point is that the place is not nearly as important as the behavior. Some good advice I got early on, even before I got in this business, was if you can learn to live on 70% of your income, you will be wildly successful financially. Whether you own your own business or not, that's 10% to God, 10% to yourself, 10% to your employer 401k. And myself meaning someplace other than the 401k. It can be a money market, a mutual fund. It doesn't have to be fancy, but what's more important is doing it. Just doing it. We can get into Roth IRAs that are tax-free. They're awesome, but that has some rules involved too that you got to wait till 59 and a half. Don't get it complicated. Just put money someplace you have access to so that when you're ready to make that move, you've got working capital that's available to you right now.
Everybody, you heard it here first. The guy who makes a business selling you different ways to invest financial money is saying, don't worry about the things. Don't worry about the places. Just save some money. Just do it. Just, great advice. Even advice that may not necessarily benefit you financially in your business, but great advice nonetheless. Just save some money, especially when you're young. Put that money away.
It's a great quote from Nike. Just do it. We'll apply it. That'll be the quote for the podcast, and we'll put the little swoosh next to it.
You think that's the title of the podcast? Just do it. We'll see. We'll see.
Tom, on pensions. Pensions used to be the norm. And most people entering the workforce today probably won't ever have one. I certainly don't. How should that reality change the way that younger workers and especially business owners think about building their financial future, if at all?
That's that question really addresses mindset. Our grandparents, I can't even say our parents anymore, but our grandparents didn't have to worry about financial planning or investing because they worked their whole lives for a single company. The company offered a pension. We talked about the 3-legged stool of retirement. One leg is Social Security, one leg is pensions, one leg is whatever other savings you have. For the private sector, we don't have one of those legs, and that's pensions. So the mindset has shifted now because of the ERISA Act back in 1974 in the Gerald Ford administration, virtually spelled the end of pensions in the private sector and created what later became 401ks and thrift savings plans. But pensions they're a tool. They're an actuarial tool that provides guaranteed lifetime income without regard to the market. They're great. But just because your company does not offer a pension doesn't mean that you can never benefit from a pension-like financial instruments later. So where does it start? It starts with saving money, having capital, all right? When an employer offers a pension in the public sector, we mean the government, federal, state, even local, city, they will fund the pension, and then eventually someone manages it, and then you hope that they manage it well, and you hope that pension is there when you retire. For the private sector, whether you have in the public sector, whether you have a pension, or for the private sector, you don't have a pension, the beginning fundamentals of financial management are the same. You've got to save money. But the mindset's different because now you're the ones responsible for its growth, not your employer. And that's where the financial advising industry was born back in the 70s because folks needed help. I love the ERISA Act, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, because people need our help. But there's nothing magical about a pension. I work with most of my federal clients that I work with. About a third of my client base are federal workers, and most of them are air traffic controllers. They retire with not one, but 2 pensions. But guess what? If all they did rely on their pension, they're going to have financial problems. They won't have an income problem, but it's not enough for them to live out their lives in the lifestyle that they've grown accustomed to. They still have to save and invest money.
That's all the time we have for this episode, but this conversation isn't over yet. We're going to pause here, though, and we'll pick it up in the next episode. Huge thank you to Tom for joining us today, and Todd, as always, thank you so much. If you want to learn more about Tom and Yeaton Financial Group, you can find that information at yeatonfg.com. That's YEATONFG.com. Every episode of Rincon Horizons, we unpack the decisions and disciplines that shape us as leaders at work, at home, and everywhere in between. Our goal is simple: to help you lead better so your organization can climb higher. If today's conversation challenged you or encouraged you, share it with someone who's thinking about making the leap. You can find out more about Rincon Aerospace or connect with Todd using the links in the show notes or at rincon.aero. That's rincon.aero. I'm Dylan Mitchell. You can learn more about my work at dm.supply. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Rincon Horizons podcast.